Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Homebrew History. It's just me solo. Bo is on yet again other duties as assigned. He's out there brewing and crewing, I guess. I don't know. This is a terrible introduction if I'm going to do this all by myself, and certainly not good at the solo act. So I need my co-host. I need Bo here. But we have a special guest joining us today, and I'm going to waste no time in bringing him on, largely because it's just me right now. So real quick, we'll just go through real quick and let you know that we've just finished up our Canada at War series. You can now enjoy that entire series online. Go to our YouTube channel, check out the video version. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. But right now, we are joined by Graham Bandy. He is the author of Nursing at the Front Line, a World War II diary from North Africa and Italy. And it follows RAF nursing orderly Harold Scrafield throughout his war. So, Graham, welcome to Homebrew History.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Joe. It's very nice.
Thanks for teaching me how to say Scrafield. And you ready? Worcestershire.
Yes, two countries separated by the same language.
So let's talk just a little bit. First off, congratulations on getting a book out, because that's always the challenge, right? You write and you write and you write, and you end up with a manuscript that's just sitting in front of you, and what do you do with it? So congratulations first and foremost. But let's talk a little bit about who Harold Scrafield was.
Yeah, well, Scray, or Harry, depending as to whom was speaking to him, was a chap who sort of got left behind by the war initially. He was somewhere high up in a gentleman's hairdressing sundries suppliers, and he was living in London at the time, and he was in the air raid precautions. I know the chaps that used to go around blowing whistles and making sure everybody had their lights out, and they were making things orderly to get into the shelters when the bombing started. But then all of a sudden they found him, and he was called up because he wasn't in a reserved occupation, and he came along to the RAF where he was assessed by them. And because he'd been in the air raid precautions, or the ARP, he'd done a lot of first aid certificates. So they said, aha, medical branch for you. So he was sent off to go and do some medical training to enhance what he'd already got. And that's where he went into the RAF. He was sent down to a place called Sidmouth in the south of England, on the south coast. And he stayed there for several months, learning how to do things. And he passed, and that's where the story starts, really.
Mm-hmm. And I think what kind of struck me by him is, when you think about the branch of the RAF, you instantly think of, fighter pilots and bomber command, and you don't really ever think about a medical service, a detachment that goes along with it. It just feels very much like an afterthought. And you go, oh yeah, man, I guess you have to have inter-service personnel too. So
well, we do now. What we did have in those, each branch, the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force, all had their own medical services. There's been a lot of, over the past few years, over the past 20 odd years, there's been a lot of interplay and joint working. So, but yeah, it was, everybody had their own service. And because the RAF was the junior service, founded on the 1st of April 1918, out of the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service, they sort of just copied everybody else and had their own medical service and dental services and everything else.
So you kind of mentioned a little bit about, works in the hairdressing supply company. He's got medical background. That's what gets him into this position. Ultimately. But it seems like such a strange story to come across. So how necessarily did you get access to his memoir?
Well, I was a nursing officer in the Army, and registered nurse, and I did all sorts of other things, and I was doing a bit of history stuff some years ago, and I used to do some living history. I think you call it hardcore reenactment over there. and I was doing a display, one of my big medical displays, and this lady came up to me and she started asking me a few questions about what I was doing and what my experiences were. I said, "Oh, right, thank you." And then she wandered off, and about half an hour later, she came back. She said, "I've been looking for somebody, and I think you're it." I went, "Oh, right, okay, thank you very much." Right, so not knowing what was coming next, and she said,
When are we going on a date? You know, that type of thing.
well, she was about 70 or something, so not quite my usual, shall we say. And she said, "Well, my neighbour died a couple of years ago." I said, "Oh, right." And she said, he had no family, there was nothing. But he had a load of notes because he was in the RAF during the war. So I said, "Oh, well, that's nice." She said, he wanted it turned into a book. I thought, right, I think you're the person to do it, she said. "Come round my house next week and come and pick it up and I'll give you all the stuff." So off I tootled the next week to this lady's bungalow, and she gave me a couple of battered plastic bags, and they were absolutely chock-a-block of photographs, unpublished photographs, notes, handwritten notes, paintings that he had done through his time in the Royal Air Force. And she said, "There you go, as long as you promise to make it into a book." So I said, "Yeah, I will." Unfortunately, I moved a few times with the services. I trotted around a lot of other places, moved house about, oh, crikey, more than half a dozen times. And unfortunately, they got buried into the detritus that sort of was always the boxes in the garage. As you know, when you've moved, you always have a load of boxes in the garage, and I've mostly forgotten about it. But I published my previous book with pen and sword, which is about identifying and dating photographs, cap badges, and uniforms for the British Army, Navy, and RAF again. And as I was getting that out and ready to publish, I went in one of the boxes and I thought, "Oh," and I pulled out these two plastic bags. By now, they're beginning to disintegrate because, you know, we're 10, 15 years later. Couldn't have been lost. So I had a word with my editor at Pen and Sword, and she went, "Oh, that sounds interesting." Because not only did he go up across North Africa, not only was he part of the liberation units in Tunis and then into Italy, which is quite an interesting story, he then gets sent to Yugoslavia as part of the Special Operations Executive Medical Mission to look after the hearts and minds of the Yugoslav partisans. And that was a bit of a selling point, I think, because it is something that there's only one book that actually mentions the medical mission, and that came out in about 1954, and there's been nothing ever since. I went through loads of stuff trying to find out about it, and it's just mentioned in passing, and even in the Royal Air Force Medical Services history books, which I've got here as well, because they came out so early after the war, it was all still very what we call secret squirrel stuff.
So you're dealing with a lot of what could have just been lost to history in a sense. You know, somebody who thought less of of Scray's story would have just simply cast it aside, but you know,
they've gone in the tip, house clearance, into a dustbin, gone, and that'd have been it.
Amazing. So people talk about one of our great partners, the bearded historian, always mentions, you have to make history by preserving history. And you've quite literally done that. You've saved a piece of that story, a piece of that Second World War story that I think if we, you move on past it, you move on past that generation, able to tell their own stories. We don't have that physical document in front of us anymore. It's gone. It's gone forever. So I guess in a sense, thank you for doing your part. But let's talk a little bit about Scray's wartime, right? And first off, once he finishes training, what's his first sort of assignment?
Well, he's sent off to a lonely airfield in the wilds of Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire in England is a very flat and some say desolate place, and the only thing you can see for miles is the cathedral at Lincoln, which was a Roman colonia at the time when they were here. So these airfields were thrown up around the country, and off they all went, and they gathered together and they became a mobile field hospital, which is exactly the equivalent of your mobile army surgical hospitals, MASH, what you used to see on the telly. And they were sent by ship in a convoy to North Africa, to the far side of North Africa towards Egypt, where they were disgorged after a very eventful passage, which he didn't really speak about, but there was a few hints later on where he was saying that when they came in the convoy, they lost a couple of ships in the convoy, and he was down on one of the very lower decks under the waterline, and he was always very worried about it. But he managed to survive. So off he went, and he landed, and they stayed for a couple of weeks while they sorted everything out. And then there was a huge long motor convoy where they went to the length, well, the breadth actually, of North Africa, right away across into Tunisia and to Tunis. And they were right behind the armoured first echelons that went in. This is where this was after the Battle of Kasserine Pass, which you probably know about. And they were landed on the other side of Africa as well, and they came from both sides. And he got there, and the first night they were literally sleeping on the bodies of dead Germans, which were just a couple of feet below the ground. And of course, there were servicemen being servicemen making jokes about it, and were saying, who hasn't changed their socks today? Because you stink. But it's not, it's just what was going on beneath them. And then they were sent to Carthage, the ancient city of Carthage, or what was at one point the ancient city of Carthage, and sent to the nunnery of the White Sisters.
What's his? So we know a little bit about the campaigns through North Africa, but what's happening for him, kind of day to day?
Day to day. I mean, it's something that doesn't. I mean, it really hasn't been touched before. I can't find anything else on the day to day stuff of what was going on for nursing orderlies in a mobile field hospital. There was only about 3 or 4 of them at the time, anyway, in the British forces, all told. So basically, what they do, they went into this nunnery. The Germans had used it as a Krankenhaus, German hospital, but after they shoved all them out and tidied it up and cleaned it up and got rid of all the septic pits that the Germans had dug, they turned it into a very nice hospital. So basically, you had a 150-bed hospital set up, which could be crashed down at a moment's notice and moved. Could be tented. Could it take over a large building or surround a large building with tents and stuff? Very much like the field and general hospitals that are provided by the forces today. This was the sort of first wave, which had been done after the lessons learnt, not only in the Great War, but also during the Spanish Civil War, which was a very useful time. That was the first time they actually used refrigerated blood transfusion lorries running up and down the lines. So, of course, all that experience was brought into play everywhere else. So he would be doing all the nursing duties that were required, because they had the doctors in the hierarchy, and underneath the doctors there were only two registered nurses, who then diverged all the treatment to excuse me, the nursing orderlies, and they went on from there, and they did all the work of nurses basically. Although they weren't registered, he was damn near fine line between what he did and what was going on. So you would see him as something what we used to call state enrolled nurses, as opposed to state registered nurses. And they're sort of just below the registered nurses. They can sort of do drug rounds and do all the sorts of things like that. But yeah, it was hard work. And of course they had even had full theatres, everything right down to the coffin maker for those that didn't survive.
So you mentioned kind of in passing the White Sisters. Who were they?
Well, there were a bunch of French nurses at Maison Lavatière. Even I have difficulty with French. And they'd been there for quite some time. There was a cathedral there and some monks as well, which had been there since the mid-19th century. They were a Catholic order who looked after the people around there. They taught the children how to do tasks and stuff that could actually find them a job, like making carpets and stuff. There's a picture in the book of the nuns teaching some of the local orphans how to make carpets so they could make their own living. And they were a small order, but very prominent, and some of them were very educated as well.
And so he's working kind of hand in hand, I guess, with them, right?
Well, no, they're quite separate, actually.
Really?
They weren't a nursing order.
Okay.
They were just an order of nuns who happened to be there, Catholic nuns, Roman Catholic nuns. They didn't really partake of the nursing side because, as I say, they weren't a nursing order, so they just went about their things and prayed for everybody all the way through.
It's really fascinating, I guess, because when you think about the depictions of nuns in film, or you think about some of the stories that you're told, right? You see the nun at the church in Bastogne, and like that image is seared in your mind. Oh, nuns, they must be helping with the. That's a fascinating kind of turn.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the film The Longest Day,
right,
in Ouistreham, you've got all those nurses marching down, and all the French blokes are trying to say, no, go away, it's too dangerous. And they just went into the building and started doing the treatments because they're all trained nurses. So, but that's the difference, because that order was a nursing order, so they were allowed to do that, but they weren't in Tunis, Carthage.
So he makes it through Tunisia, Carthage, and Carnage too, I guess. Carnage at Carthage, but then we shift focus out of North Africa into the Mediterranean. We're looking now at Italy, Sicily, and Italy. So what's his experiences like that way?
Well, Sicily, they rather sort of skipped. And when they got to Italy, 3-1 Mobile Field Hospital RAF was sent to a place called Bari, which is in the south. Lovely place. And they were put into an old school, which was right on the coast, because the waves actually lapped up on their own little private beach at the back. There's some pictures in the book again about this. And all of a sudden, they were told they had to go and do some top secret stuff. They didn't know what they were talking about at that point. What they did, they went to the local airport or aerodrome, and they were meeting hundreds and hundreds of DC-3 Dakotas coming in, air ambulances, bringing in wounded partisans from Yugoslavia. These were Tito's partisans who the Allies had thrown their lot in with, because there was a lot of rather naughty things going on with some of the other groups that were trying to take over the stuff there, like the Technics and the people. And one group, the Gestapo, even said how disgusting these people were with the way they killed all the women and children. So when the Gestapo say that somebody is disgusting and terrible, you begin to wonder how bad this lot were. So
it does make you ask the question, really.
It begs the question very loudly, doesn't it? So anyway, Tito's lot with the Red Star, and of course all of them were all of the opinion that this was all the Russians providing all this service for them and providing all this medical stuff and medical attention. And they were coming in at night initially, before the mastership of the air was taken, very dangerously, coming in without radar, without autopilot and stuff, especially on the old DC-3s,
Mhm.
and they were coming in, and they were bringing all these wounded people in, and then all the civilians started appearing as well. One aeroplane was absolutely chocker of loads and loads of babies, which
Hmm.
is one of the chapters in the book. And these have been evacuated out of the firing line because
Mhm.
these airfields in Yugoslavia were very, very close to the front line, and they're all just being shoved on there with whatever, whether they got pulmonary tuberculosis, whether they got gangrene in their foot, whether they'd had anything else going on, bullet wounds, pieces of shell fragments, anything. They were just shoved into one of these air ambulances and whisked across the Adriatic and dumped down in Bari, which wasn't that far away. So they were dealing with everything, and including these babies, and they all came in silently on this aeroplane. Then they bedded them all down, and they were all fed, watered, and before they were sent off back through Italy to somewhere a bit safer, they gave them all their ration chocolate. They gave them other stuff to eat and drink, and there was not a dry eye in the house, apparently, according to Scray's stories. So that's how that all started. He was sent off to a Spitfire squadron at Cannae, which was another sort of Carthaginian battlefield a bit further across and up the country, where he was the medical nursing orderly to a doctor for one of the Spitfire squadrons operating from there, which is another story, and he goes into all sorts of stuff in that as well. So that's quite an interesting one, because it was also a photo reconnaissance unit, and he had all these unpublished photographs of Monte Cassino before, during, and after the bombardments. So all those pictures of Monte Cassino in the book, not seen the light of day before, exactly the same as all the pictures of all the partisans. He took loads and loads and loads and loads of pictures, and these are all totally previously unpublished.
That's amazing. And again, goes back to that idea that if someone would have cared less, or a cleaning service would have come through, I mean, that again goes right back to that point. So it sounds like his experience is really, really varied, because one minute he's caring for children who might have tuberculosis, and the next second he's caring for Spitfire pilots in a photo reconnaissance unit. And before all that, he's sleeping on the bodies of dead Germans. And, it just sounds like he's got so many different stories to tell. What I think we'll do is we'll take a quick break right now, and we'll come right back with more homebrew history, and we'll pick up with the rest of Scrafield's war, and talk a little bit more to Graham about some of the work that he's done, and then where you might be able to find out some more about Harold Scrafield and about his war. So let's pop off here and do a quick commercial break. Hey there, did you know that Homebrew History is brought to you by Civil War Trails? Civil War Trails, the world's largest outdoor museum. 1,600 different sites across 6 different states, miles and miles and miles and miles of history for you to venture through. Be sure to get out there and make some history of your own. You can visit civilwartrails.org. You can find the link down below, where you can order your own map and plan your road trip through Civil War history. If you're out there and you do see a Civil War Trails sign, make sure you snap a picture with it and tag Civil War Trails on social media using the hashtag #SignSelfie to help spread the word about the world's largest outdoor museum. If you join us over on our Buy Me a Coffee, you'll be able to submit some member questions. You can see down below the link for Buy Me a Coffee. Anything to help Bo and Joe keep up with the flow of wonderful guests and all the great content that we're able to produce for you. $5 a month. $5 a month. Or you can even buy a yearly subscription, which also, hey, is a hell of a deal. But you get access to free exclusive live streams. You'll get access to early episodes, some sneak peeks along the way, and you'll also be able to receive our last call and our Lagniappe newsletter. So you get the last call episodes, the Lagniappe newsletter. What else could you want? It's $5. $5, forego a coffee, you're good to go. Homebrew History does air weekly. You can catch us every single week. We'll do some series here and there, but again, you've got us every Monday. You can count on us, except when one of us is responsible for editing and the other one is otherwise occupied. Designs like our logo are featured by and illustrated by the bearded historian Jeff Williams. You can find Jeff's Etsy page right down below in the description of this video and in the show notes if you're listening to us. But Jeff Williams is a great partner to Homebrew History, fantastic guy, and he's making some great stuff over at the Bearded Historian. So check out the Etsy page. Be sure to pick up a pack of stickers there while you're at it. And I think what we'll do now is we'll make our way back to the show after a couple more commercials that I don't produce. So on they go. Good stuff. Now we're back. Graham, you had to sit there idly and just wait. And I'm sure that was uncomfortable for you because it's always uncomfortable for us.
No, it's quite fine. I have a big mug of tea, so I'm fine. Thank you very much.
As do I. So let's kind of finish up talking here just a little bit about wartime, right? Because you mentioned that he's helping out with Tito's partisans and he's helping treat some of these civilians. But then Scray also goes to Yugoslavia, doesn't he?
After the Spitfire squadron was moved from Cannae, they were told, him and Mac the doctor, that they were going away to do something else. And they were told they were going to Yugoslavia. And they sort of wondered what was going on. So they had to load their ambulance onto a landing craft. And they were ferried across the Adriatic to a place called Zara, or Zada as it is now, where they unloaded and tried to speak to people. But of course, nobody bothered to send anybody who could speak Yugoslav, Serbian, or anything else with them. So they were trying to get away with pidgin English and a smattering of Italian, which they knew. And they found themselves there. Now, this was a Brigadier Fitzroy MacLean. He had an idea that we should support these Yugoslav partisans fighting the Germans in this last bit of the war, because there were some nasty things going on there.
And what's the time on this? 1944, 45?
44, yeah, 43, 40, well, 44 by now.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sent over there, and he set up this medical mission to Yugoslavia. Now, Fitzroy MacLean wasn't just any brigadier. He was a brigadier in the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, whom I'm sure some of you have heard of quite nicely.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, they're all sort of secret squirrels, sneaky beaky people who go off doing things. And you've got people like Violet Szabo doing SOE operations in Europe, and all the escape lines and all the sabotage lines that they were doing over there. But in Yugoslavia, they were doing a Hearts and Minds mission, where they were there to look after the Yugoslavian, not just the partisans, which a forward unit actually did. And the book is actually referenced at the back of my book, saying to go and have a read of this one. Because it is very good. It's very old. It came out just after the war, so there's not a lot of stuff that you would expect to see in there these days. But it's a very underrepresented piece of history, and nobody knows much about it. So Mission Rogers, as it became known as, after the doctor who was right in the interior, sometimes behind enemy lines, they did the first part of the triage, and then they were sent back to where Scray was. And they also had all these civilians piling in because, you know, there was nothing for them at that time. So Scray, in his spare time, was doing loads and loads of paintings, nice little colour paintings, but only postcard size, 6x4 inches postcards, which he was doing in colour, and they are in the book, but unfortunately they're in black and white. And if people would care to go to my website, which is livingmilitaryhistory.com, so that's all one word, livingmilitaryhistory.com, you'll see there's a little tab to say REF colour. Go into that, and all the pictures are in high resolution, and all the paintings are in full colour. One of them is the picture of the convoy which he did going across the Med, and is absolutely stunning. And it goes all the way through. You got pictures of paintings of these partisans of Vesuvius, everything. It is a really, really interesting. And of course, these would have been lost to history as well. And they're, they're not naive paintings. They are competent ones, especially for the size. Of course, he was painting these by just one paraffin storm lantern, and that's all the light he had when he was painting these in his time off. And they're great. So I can commend to go and have a look at them on my website, and you'll see how really good they are.
Graham, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw one right up here real quick, just because I was able to see one. Oh no, I'm sorry, I can't get it up. It's the wrong type of file. So we'll go ahead. What we'll do is we'll just put that link down in the description, and as we post this, we'll actually, with your permission, we'll use one of them as the thumbnail.
Please do.
To get people to click and see the video, certainly, but then also learn a little bit more about Scray. So I'm just looking at the pictures right now, and I'm kind of blown away, right? If he's just painting the things that are around him, it's hard to think of the war as having these kind of beautiful backgrounds to it. But you remember, this is people's home. This is a land that was lived in and farmed and everything, and here he is in the middle of the war, being able to make these wonderful creations.
Italy's a wonderful place. And it's very easy to do nice paintings of it. But he's done very nice paintings of it. Almost under fire.
Which is that's the amazing thing, right? You think about the sketch artists, and you think about going back to the American Civil War, right? My playground. You think about like the Alfred Waltz of the world, able to just sit there and sketch so quickly these incredible scenes of great battles. This isn't scenes of great battles. This is scenes of great beauty, which I think is that maybe that's that mind trying to come away from the desperate nature of warfare. So
he did cover up an awful lot. I mean, there's just to get a few pen pictures of a few of these individuals in the book, it was absolute nightmare. Because he cross-referenced people and didn't say anything much about anybody in his notes. The only one he really spoke about was Dame Veronica Ashcroft, who was the first female nurse to be parachute qualified in the RAF, Princess Mary's RAF nursing services. And she became a dame and honorary nurse to the Queen and all sorts of stuff. But she was the only one that was actually named in the end. But all the rest of them, and he amalgamated some of the stories as well. So picking them apart, trying to get through his, I wouldn't say he's trying to cover it up. I think he's just, some bits he didn't want to remember, which he alludes to at the beginning. And other stuff, I think he's just trying to save, embarrassment for people who might come along and read it afterwards. So,
and is there any possibility too that he just conflates events almost just by accident? They just sort of run together.
Yeah, there's a few that run together. There's a chap, South African Air Force, Duncan, who crash lands, and he's in correspondence with the family. So obviously he knew him, he nursed him, he looked after him. It was part of what he was doing. But the records say this chap crashed in Florence, and he just crashed. He wasn't shot down, he wasn't shot up or anything. And all this pilot's personal records state the same thing. What we have over here is called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. They look after all the military graves. It's a bit like bits of Arlington in different countries and all the rest of it. And that's at odds with the story. but the family actually confirm what Scray is saying in their letters. So unless he was doing something secret screw himself, there's Duckham chap, Michael Duckham, who knows? But it's totally different to the official records.
Which is amazing. Again, another one of those details that could have just been lost forever. You know, there's a family that has confirmation of how, you know, their family members were experienced. Amazing. Graham, I'm going to go ahead and take that banner off, and we'll switch screens here, and we'll bring the book up. There's the book right there. Nursing at the Front Line. You can pick that book up where?
From Pen and Sword, or the any good booksellers in America, or even Amazon.
Okay, awesome. And it's out through Pen and Sword, right? So we always love to promote a good Pen and Sword book.
Thank you.
Graham, we've got a little segment on this show, and you kind of already gave us a little hint of what it is, but what's in your cup?
Sorry? What's in my cup? I have Earl Grey tea.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I went for a nice minty green tea today. It keeps things nice and fresh, and we're always looking for good refreshment here on Homebrew History. That is part of the show, after all.
I commend some Earl Grey with a nice little bit of bergamot in there. Just gives it that nice little extra taste.
Nice. And I have to take tea advice, of course. You are the professional here.
Use a kettle. Don't use the microwave.
Always a kettle. Always a kettle.
Blended stuff.
My living situation's a little strange, and the people here, they didn't have a kettle, and I was like, wow. All right, well, I'm going to go spend $12 of my own good money to buy something that you should have had from the outset, because I don't understand this. You have to boil the water on the stove or put it in the micro. No, we're not doing this. We're buying a kettle. So here I am, kettle, and it's approved. It fits under the sink nozzle, so we're good. We are absolutely good there. I would feel remiss if I didn't do this segment, but I feel bad because it is Bo's segment. Is there something that you learned along the way when you were writing Nursing at the Front Line, when you were uncovering Scray's story, that was just boohickey? And boohickey is it's just garbage history. It's just a total myth. It's a total piece of nonsense that you wish you wouldn't have come across, or you wish wouldn't be included in the story or in the popular narrative. And you go, oh God, I can't wait to drive this out. What's the boohickey?
I don't think I can say what the stuff that actually make me go, whoa. General Mark Clark.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and what a complete... I don't see how I can say it politely. What a complete piece of work he was.
Yeah, he was. He was. I'm actually a bit of a Mark Clark apologist, I'll be honest. I feel like I have to be in so many circles because everybody hates him. So it's somebody's job to have to stick up for them.
I didn't say I hated him. I just thought, you what?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody else would have been shot for what he did.
Yeah.
Taking his phones off the hook, saying, no, I'm not going to talk to anyone, disobeying orders, saying I'm going to shoot anybody who gets in my way, British or Allied. Wow.
There's the idea that you try to win the war by whatever means necessary, and that certainly seems to fit Clark's bill. But as I've, you keep reading, you keep learning more and more about the guy. Definitely an egotist, but they all are.
Oh, yeah, you had to be.
All are. If you have a general star on your shoulder or on your collar, you have to be somewhat of an egotist.
Yeah. But then again, not everybody had 52 PAs with them all the time, and correspondents following them around.
Although there's a hell of a lot of pictures of Patton and McCarthy, so it shows that all the great ones.
Yeah, I mean,
all the greats have their press corps with them. Right?
Yeah, but not as many as Clark did.
On that point, I think we might have to disagree. I think it's just my personal like for the guy. And two, there's so many people that just don't like him. And they always say, 36, the Texans, right? Maybe it's that I don't like Texas. I don't know.
Well, maybe it's because he
that.
let an entire several German divisions escape. Instead of closing the pincers, which was about 3 miles left to go, he decided to pull his troops out of the line and just run for Rome.
Run for Rome. Yeah.
And
but is there a value in capturing Rome?
It was an open city.
But as a press and as a drawing attention to your theater, is there a reason to do it, to gain the notoriety, to put the attention back on your army? That would be my argument for it.
Yeah, but if you've got 3 miles to go and you're closing a pincer on the German divisions who are going to escape and prolong the war for goodness knows how many months, up to a year, and allow them to escape for your own vanity trip, causing how many civilian Allied German deaths?
There's a lot to be critical of Mark Clark. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, it's very interesting that the photograph of him coming up the steps in Rome, which I'm sure you've seen, was actually taken by a British photographer, a bloke called Alan Wicker.
But he probably didn't feel too very comfortable being there and having that picture.
Yeah, but Mark Clark would only be photographed from one side as well.
Yeah, that goes back to the ego, I think.
Yeah,
goes back to the ego. Yeah. But Graham, we wanted to thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Joining us. And again, people can find the book on Amazon. They can order it through Pen and Sword. And you can find Graham, his website, Living Military History. And then where else can people get in touch with you?
Through my website.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I do have family over there in Pennsylvania and South Carolina. So
awesome.
So a big hello to Yvonne and all her family, and Lydia and all the rest of them. And all the other lot that I don't know about, but I know they're out there somewhere because one of the branches of the family went over there. So if your name's Paxton, you may be a relative of mine as well.
Well, Graham, we'll get this out very, very soon, and we'll get your American listeners to go out there and pick up a copy of the book and follow along with Scray's War. But for Homebrew History, on behalf of Bo, who, again, out and about, running around with his head chopped off, I guess, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.